And hello out there to webinar land. Welcome to this fantastic webinar, Mastering OpEx in 2024, Trends You Won't Want to Miss. Now, hi folks, my name is J.M. Erlinson. I am your handy global ARIS evangelist here based in Toronto, Canada, so for the Americas. And today, my friend Casper and I will be going through some of these trends. We'll introduce ourselves a little bit before we get started. So I'll first turn it over to Casper to give you a little bit more about him and his background, and then I'll jump back into it and tell you a little bit more about me and some things you might be interested in.
Really good. Hi, JM. How are you? Good to be with you today. So, hi, guys. My name's Casper. I'm a senior director for Software AG in the EMEA region. I have a role of a principal business consultant, meaning I'm advising and I'm coaching and helping our biggest clients on how to actually adopt and implement and take the best use out of BPM as a concept from a mostly organizational point of view. Been doing that the last 6 years, spent more than 2 decades in the manufacturing and banking industry before that. And I'm very happy to be here with my friend JM, talking to you about the trends in operational excellence for 2024. JM, what about
Wonderful.
you?
Well, fun fact, I actually started my career not in engineering or in BPM at all. I started in the performing arts. However,
Wow.
I've grown into that from a master's in manufacturing, so we share a manufacturing background. Until being a customer, actually, I was working as a management consultant and discovering BPM tools through working on projects, major ERP implementations. I'm sure many of our friends on the line are familiar with the challenges around ERP implementation, which was a huge thing for me in the 2010s, and it became a part of my life. And I discovered ARIS and decided to come and join Software AG, and it's been, I think, 13 years at the organization since then, getting a chance to work with companies all over the world who are undergoing similar challenges that I faced back when I was in my management consulting days, and even before then, back when I was in my manufacturing engineering days, looking at very physical processes, which I still think is cool, but we work a little bit more in the conceptual space these days. And talking about conceptual and the space itself and things people are really challenged by, I want to take some moments to talk a little bit about what Forbes thinks. I know, you want to hear what Casper and I want to say, and we got some trends to walk through, but just to give you some of the bona fides that the other people in the industry are thinking of. So Forbes talks about some business challenges that a lot of organizations are facing right now. We see inflation, economic downturn, the need to tighten the belt for organizations. We see about a bunch of challenges around supply chain security. I mean, if you take a look at some of the global events that have been happening, whether or not it's conflicts in different parts of the world that are threatening supply chain, whether or not it's interruptions in transportation. I mean, geez, ever given it's not even been very long since I got stuck. We also talk about increasing customer expectations. More and more customers are expecting a tailored experience, something that's specific to them, that they're getting exactly what they're asking for at the right time, at the right offer, with the right conditions. These are very specific needs, and a tailored experience is more and more the norm rather than sort of the benefit or the bonus on top. Think of it as kind of the power windows of customer interaction. Before, many years ago, power windows were a feature, and now they're not even mentioned on the product spec sheet. We see a lot of organizations, and I think Forbes agrees with that, with the idea of accelerated digital transformation. I mean, before we look at digital transformation, the sort of digital twinning of the organization, and then the transformation to off of legacy systems and off of manual processes on digital tools. Yeah, that's accelerating even more and more. And as companies have fallen behind on their digital transformations, they're being called to task now by investors, or by the market or by as employees, the inability to deliver a good employee experience. So that leads into the war for talent. Forbes really calls that out, and I think we see that a lot in a lot of the customers we work with. We have while there is an economic downturn in some cases, in some sense, and in some spaces. That means more and more your tight teams who have a small number of specialists need to be full of the very best you can find, and providing an exceptional employee experience has become paramount into attracting and retaining the best talent you can find for your particular needs in your organization. Obviously, data and device security have become very much more important. That's particularly relevant, not just for customers, but data security as we take a look at other forms of data processing. And we take a look at things like task mining. I think, Casper, you've had the same conversation over and over with customers about task
Oh yeah.
mining, and we ask about what their security plans are, and they say, well, how much you actually need to scrape from the screen, like that. Those are concerns people are having. And then lastly, and it shouldn't be last because it is the future of the world that we live in, but sustainability remains a big priority for a lot of organizations. And so this is what Forbes has brought forward, and I think for the most part we agree. But at Software AG and Casper and I, Casper, you've been updating this particular trend map. For just a quick pitch, if you haven't taken a look at the website that comes along with this, we've got links that you can follow. And when you registered, you would have probably gotten a link to the ebook. But we have an ebook that accompanies this particular webinar that includes this trend map in full. So don't worry, when we show you the screen, you won't have to take notes. Instead, you can simply
before
download
you go
the
there,
ebook.
JM, before you go to the trend map,
Please.
let me ask you a question.
Sure.
We're talking about operational excellence here, and you and I, we love, and certainly the whole ARIS community, we love to talk about BPM. So I think it might be a good idea to just position really briefly where we think BPM fits into operational excellence, because operational excellence is a much more broader and overspanning terminology, I would say.
Yeah.
So without wanting to put you on the spot, but I know you handle pressure very well, where do you think BPM fits in well and best within the operational excellence space? How would you describe that relationship?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. From my perspective, operational excellence is a sort of a goal, but it's not when you actually really reach. It's kind of an ambition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And operational excellence, it is you are continuously striving more and more to find ways of making your operations work in an efficient manner that maximizes the use of your resources, that streamlines your process with the least amount of waste, that appeases your customers or delights your customers. Hopefully, that brings
Yeah.
your employees together in a collaborative way. So there's a whole bunch of components to it. And you designed a beautiful facade of that building. The underpinnings, the structure, the architecture that comprises the beams and struts, the walls and floors of the house that you're building, that's BPM. How do you make that work? And sure, it looks a lot of different ways in different organizations, but the foundation, the structure of that house is BPM. It's hard to achieve, this idea of operational excellence, or at least move towards operational excellence, without a few things: consistency, which BPM
Yep.
as a practice tries to push, without accountability, and so measurement, points of measurement,
Yep.
KPIs you're looking to peak on, and then data to capture those KPIs, so evidence that you're capturing, and then a tie back into corporate strategy and attainment and corrective action, or continuous improvement. So once again, BPM as a discipline is all about enabling the structures that will make operational excellence possible. And
Yeah.
without that, I feel like it is it's a whole explanation based system. It says, I did this, and you make up an explanation of why you did it, which comes from best practices that you've heard, or a consultant told you, or best guesses, or just good intentions. But
Yeah.
we want to take a look at BPM as evidence, not
Cool.
just flat explanation, evidence.
I like that. Thanks, Jem. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I think that we can agree very easily on the fact that it very much boils down to the way of working. How do we agree that we're
Yeah.
working in an organization to get the best results that we have? And at the moment that you want to keep improving very often means you need to change something from how you did it to how you're going to do it. To put it very simple, meaning that BPM can help you there as well. But I think it's good to just position that, because we're talking about operational excellence a lot in this webinar. But everybody who knows us a little bit knows that we're BPM folks,
Yes.
down to the core of our fibers. So let's take a look at that trend map, and I'll pull it up right now. And just for the people who think that this looks like an underground tube map, you're absolutely right. Why would we reinvent a wheel? But what we do have, and we've been keeping this webinar, this trend map, up to date for a number of years now, with our predecessor Helge Hess, who started this a number of years back. So we need to shout out to Helge there. And we are looking into what we see in the market and the opinions and the trends that we see that are picking up, and how do they correlate and how do they connect to other things that we see. So macro and micro trends combined. Now, if you start from the left-hand side, where we basically say there is about 8 or 9, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mega trends on this slide. So they start from the top, or it's actually 8, sorry. There's 8. It starts with connectedness on the top left, and then it goes down the left-hand side. And if I look at what's changed compared to last year, is that we had a new way of working, or new work actually in there, which I think we've now relabeled as hybrid culture, because it's much more encompassing than new work used to be.
Yeah.
And JM will come back to that later on in the webinar. Another one that we've kept unchanged is process excellence, and I think that's even getting more attention now than it did 5 years ago. So it's on a comeback tour. And another one that is new on this is operational resilience, because we also hear that one coming back more and more often. And I think it's easy to do that. I'll come back to that one afterwards a little bit later. Now, what this trend map does is to give you a bit of an idea of how things are related, connected, which things that they have in common, which things are absolutely not in common. And what you see here, of course, is a number of big hubs, so to speak. So the bigger squares that you see, like digital transformation, or an enterprise management system, or the whole customer management. So on the right-hand side is CX part, customer touch points. All of these are, let's say, really major hubs where things come together. But other than that, you'll see that every major trend has a number of stations, has a number of different components to it that you might go through, maybe not in this particular order. We did not put them here with a clear-cut sequence. They're here just to make sure that we've put them on the map somewhere. Same as with an underground map. There's no apparent order in there. There's just a bunch of names on a map. Now, if you have an idea of what that means, then let me fill in the stations for you, and you'll see that makes the slide, and please don't try to read it. But it will give you a bit of an idea of what kind of micro topics we see in the market right now, that are, some of them might already be there for years or maybe even decades. I mean, JM, end-to-end processes, center of excellence. I mean, they've been there for a while, right?
They have, but they remain relevant, right? And
they remain relevant.
I actually wanted to hone in on something you mentioned before, because I think that's really important. I also see a weirdly renewed focus on process excellence in a lot of the organizations I work with. Can you tell me a little bit about what are the commonalities, some root causes why process excellence might be coming to the fore again in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I believe that one of the reasons for that needs to be found in the disruptions that we've had in our supply chains in the economy. I mean, I don't have to talk about the evergreen that got stuck in the Suez Canal, about all of the things, why all of the attacks on ships right now that go through the Red Sea, that make companies like Maersk actually need to decide that they need to go all the way around the African Horn, all the way around Africa, the continent, adding a lot of extra money to every container that's on one of these ships. And since our global economy is very depending on things that we ship by container on a ship overseas, that has an immediate impact. And meaning that if these things happen, you need to find other ways to make sure that you keep your healthy margin and your profitability as a company in place, because otherwise you'll simply go bankrupt in a number of years. So one of the things to do that is to make sure that you're prepared for this, and that you can actually improve very quickly. You get agile as an organization. So I'm not talking about agile as the IT delivery system that it used to be before it really became a word. But I'm talking about organizational or business agility. Yeah? So how fast can we adapt to things that are happening in our surroundings? And process excellence is one of those things that can help you. So the quicker you can make changes to the way that you work and roll them out and make sure that all of your employees know that something has changed, the quicker you can adapt to these changing circumstances. So to me, that's one of the reasons why process excellence is getting back on the map.
I also see that from a perspective. Yeah, no, I think that's correct. I also see that from a perspective of changing expectations, market expectations, investor expectations, on new product delivery. I mean, you think about the product release cycles in a lot of these organizations, they continue to shorten and shorten and shorten. And that like the CI/CD pipeline for a lot of new innovations that are being rolled out to customers, sometimes weekly. And organizations need to have a very firm base upon which to say, I mean, it's the same idea. If your process is built on shifting sands, then it's very hard to build something that's strong on top of it that actually looks good and sticks around at least enough for people to use it. And so having a foundational base of governed process and allows companies to be more agile in the marketplace as they look to win the war on innovations. And particularly when we see big disruptors like AI that have really made a big big difference for a lot of organizations who previously look at the market valuation cap on some of these companies. They've wildly changed as a result of their ability to quickly adapt to the needs of the investors and expectations on their integration of AI into their product suites. Process excellence is more important than ever in those organizations. And once you can see the ones who are able to adapt quickly and integrate that with their product suite and be able to roll it out to market and get customers on it and showcase those, they show up in the news, and the other organizations have fallen behind. And so setting up that baseline of excellence in process, and particularly when you look at the process governance, I mean, having a way to quickly govern new applications in your ecosystem, new processes you're going to roll out to every employee, be able to help drive that into your business model. Like governance is a key component. If you have that established already, then you're able to be reactive and you're able to achieve those goals and show back the achievements very quickly. And once again, I think the market can tell when you're able to do that and when you're not. But I want to get into something you mentioned before, because it's around operational. Well, at least I think the topic we're going to talk right now is operational resilience. Because you talk about not just market disruptions, but like literally physical, like supply chain breakages or major world events that create serious conditions that challenge companies, that really they put them to the test. You know, if we're talking about building a house here, that's the earthquake that's going to run under it. So tell me a little bit more about that one line, and then we'll go into another one afterwards. But let's focus in on OR.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks, JM. So I already give a little bit of an example, but I'll go a little bit into more detail. And to do that, let me just bring up a next slide, because I think that's one of the major trends that we see happening right now in the market, is that operational resilience, which has been there all along, but it's really taking center stage right now. And the reason why it does is because disruption is just an everyday occurring event right now. Doesn't matter where you are, there is disruption left and right. Whether it's something stupid as, that wasn't exactly stupid, but you saw that happening during the whole pandemic, where we ran out of computer chips. Everybody needed to work from home. How quickly can you as an organization turn your organization around to enable your work staff to work from home? I mean, that really is an operational resilience topic. It sometimes is also mentioned as business continuity management, which is a subset of operational resilience, I would say. But what you see happening is that governments around the world are making much more rules and making it much more stricter for organizations to make sure that they are ready for disrupting events. And they might be physical, they might also be purely digital. JM, you remember the time that we as a company were going through such a disruption back in 2020. How quickly did we turn around? I mean, we had to work from our personal computer for like 3-4 days, and then we were back to cleaned up machines and back to working. And then, yes, of course, we felt the aftermath for a couple of weeks, but most of our customers did not notice too much about that. That is also a sign of operational resilience. And the way that you look at that, if you look at, for instance, Australia, where you have the CPS 230 regulation that comes into effect, there's the UK that's running ahead with the whole DORA, so the Digital Operation Resilience Act. The European Union is doing the same. I'm sure you'll see the same things in the American continent, JM. But
Yeah.
the real question, I think, with operational resilience is it brings so many things together. It brings together knowing which regulations you need to comply with. It brings together what processes did we implement to cover these regulations. So how do we go about, how do we organize ourselves to make sure that we are in compliance with all the regulations? And then it brings together, do we have the data to prove that we're actually in compliance? I think this is where process mining and task mining and data mining comes into the equation. So it's really one of those topics that is like a drain, I would say. Everything comes together there. And you really need to think about how are we organizing ourselves to make sure that all of the components that we need to have a high operational resilience are actually in place. Knowing which risks you run as an organization and which controls you have in place tied to your processes that you have. I mean, that's becoming a vital part, because the world is a very volatile place now, more than 50 years ago. So you need to make sure that you're align your organization and the way that you work to mirror that. And just a question from my side, JM, how do you think about that from an American perspective, American content perspective? I know that you're in Canada, so don't get me wrong.
I'm also American too. Don't worry.
No worries about that. But do you see?
But yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, do you see the same there?
So I do, but one of my perspectives is a little bit different. I see this as a part of the investor and market expectations. So investors we're finding investors are less and less willing to take on operational risk in organizations that don't have a plan very well. Like they've got a great product, but they're not resilient against disruption. And if you don't have a resiliency strategy in place, it becomes a risky bet, a financial bet. And so markets and investors are less willing to come and support that. If you don't have those clearly laid out, if you aren't in, even if there aren't regulations and regulatory obligations, at least in place, if you can't clearly show that you've got these plans in place, you've been able to weather storms, you've been able to come back from significant disruptions. And that becomes a concern at an investor level, which I hate to always bring it back to money and investors, but a lot of American organizations, I think, are thinking about that and their perception and market perception. That's a big risk for them that is outside of just business operational risk. That is a market perception risk that they don't want to face. And so being able to show that on your reports, and your reports being able to comply to regulations, even if you're not necessarily required to do so, and being able to show up in the news for the good reasons, not for the bad reasons. And we see the news media is very easy or quick to jump on regulatory oversights or on organizational like breaking down of processes. I mean, geez, we've had big bank collapses in the last little while with FTX and SVB and things like that. Like, we see significant organizational challenges, and those aren't as huge of an operational resiliency thing, but rather just as we've seen a lot of collapses that have led to significant market devaluations of people's investment properties. They're looking for companies that can stand up against these challenges and survive and thrive despite them, because we know that disruption will continue to happen, that there is always significant risk in business operations. And if you don't have an operational resiliency strategy in place, you're liable to fall victim to any number of conditions that you don't want to see happen, but are likely to in some capacity at some point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your vision on that, JM. And I think one of the key components in operational excellence is the human factor.
Yeah.
It's people and behavior. I mean, virtually every cyber attack starts with a person doing something stupid, so to speak, willingly or not willingly. I mean, let's cut them some slack. They are getting very sophisticated nowadays, but there is always that one thing that happens which leads inevitably and ultimately to, for instance, a cyber attack or a hack attempt. So making that segue into people and behavior and the way that we work, JM, there's this other major trend around hybrid culture that I think also poses additional risks from an operational resilience point of view, because you need to cover more than just your offices. You need to cover basically the entire infrastructure until the home of the people that work from home. So could you take us through that hybrid culture and what you think about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So let me share. I mean, this is of last year, as of last year, but people are looking to work pretty overwhelmingly in some form of hybrid pattern. And I understand RTO mandates are a thing for a lot of organizations. They feel like they're going to need people in the office more and more. But even organizations with very strong RTO mandates aren't even RTO 5 days a week. They're often 2 or 3 days a week, which means these organizations are still and are contending with this idea of hybrid culture that will be a persistent part of their organizational structure and work and way of working, for years to come. It's a part of the war on talent is being able to access talent wherever it exists. So, for instance, if you're not near an office, but you're one of the best people in your field, why shouldn't you be part of that organization? That's how they win the war on talent, by meeting people where they are. So you're going to have to deal with a hybrid culture. Now, what does hybrid culture mean? Well, there's a lot of things that we want to talk about in hybrid culture, but let's first talk about how do you build processes out that actually work in a hybrid culture. So we look at this particularly for 2024 and beyond, this more and more this need for a digital enablement and what I like to call a digital or hybrid equity. When I say digital or hybrid equity, I mean whether or not you're physically in an office or you're remote, that you have an equity in the ability to contribute towards the organizational way of working. And that equity means that all your employees feel that value, feel that involvement, and contribute positively to decision making. And that means you have clear digital policies and SOPs and guidelines that can influence the way in which your organization works and then influence your employee action that is clearly outlined in a digital repository space that they can easily get to and a way that they can feel interacted with. And that leads to the term I also like to call is concierge enablement. And you think about customer expectations are going up and up. Well, employee expectations are going up and up, and particularly in a hybrid culture. What does concierge enablement means? It means to me and a lot of people who are talking about, I need training, I need an enablement, I need to get passion, I need to feel involved, but on my own terms. And so they're requesting asynchronous information that is always on, always available whenever they need it, that they can access, that makes them feel like they understand the tasks, that is responsive to their needs. So for instance, like they more integration of AI and chatbots, large language learning models that are focused on enablement for organizations, that are not one size fits all. Of course, you take rather a series of stops on a subway map that lets you to find a combination of skills that you need just in time to be able to do the best job you can do. That's a concierge approach, something that's focused on the employee needs. But it also goes into systems you use. We're finding more and more that employees are asking for responsive and tailored systems that are focused on what they'll need from a hybrid perspective to be able to do their work wherever they are. And so systems that morph their interfaces depending on what the employee is doing or what their role is, how they're using it, or systems that are able to portray information in easy to access ways for executives without having to do additional work right off of the work that you're doing as a person who's doing data entry or who's doing modeling and analysis, so that you don't have to do everything twice. And these are the sort of thing, when you have tighter teams, when you have people who are more geographically distributed, you need more automation and augmentation behind how you do things in order to give it the relative weight that you intend without having to spend the time that you simply don't have. So it's digital enablement, it's equity across channels, it's concierge for each of your employees, and it's a digital twin of the organization that is an evolved, augmented digital twin with AI support and with ultimately with bringing teams together through interactive and on-demand means. What do you see in this kind of thing as well? Do you have any thoughts on how you've seen hybrid culture change, particularly, let's say, in the last couple of years, as we've sort of moved into later stage pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with your assessment on that, JM. So if I look at the last 5 to 10 years, working from home, working hybridly, so to speak, was something that was I would say, privileged for the happy few. Very often it was just management. But most of the people that worked office jobs, they were in the office full time. And slowly but surely, certainly in the Benelux and in Northwestern Europe, I think it became more custom that you could work from home for a day, or if you were not feeling 100%, you could work from home. But it was not as logical and commonly accepted as it is now. I think that's one of the only good things that came out of the COVID pandemic, is that it has been proven that you can work from home. And if you still have,
Yes,
I mean, sure,
absolutely.
there will always be jobs that are restricted to a physical location, and you can't change that. If you run production, you work where the production actually is.
Yeah,
But at the moment that you do knowledge work, or you do work with computers, administrative work, there is almost no reason anymore why not you could do that in a hybrid form. Now, the one thing that I also see is that people are still social animals, meaning
yes,
that we do want to get into the office from time to time, but not to work, but to maintain our relationships with our coworkers. And so, we see that in the team that I work in, which has about 5 people now. We live geographically dispersed, not over a huge area, but it's still, I would say, it has a radius of 1,000 kilometers if we put it on the map. So
hmm,
once every 2 weeks, we try to have an office day, and we just come together and we pick a couple of topics, and we discuss them. It's about having, you can discuss topics in an online meeting as well, but body language is one of those things that you can't really mimic in an online meeting, and that is something that I sincerely miss. Now,
yeah,
another thing that I see happening is in for my line of work, I do a lot of workshops. Workshops are typically done on site. For the same reason, if you need to focus on a screen for 8 hours, be mindful of what's happening in another room, that's virtually impossible.
yeah,
You need to be in the same location. But the good thing is that now that everybody works from home, that is appreciated that much more. That you say, listen, I'll travel to a location, I'll take the effort and the cost to travel somewhere and have a meaningful conversation or a workshop for a day or for a couple of hours. But the threshold to go somewhere has been raised by the fact that it's so easy to just connect to everybody online.
yeah. I mean, I think that's one of those things. You remember the old expression, "This meeting could have been an email." Well, it's the same
Yeah,
idea. Yeah,
yeah,
this offsite could have been a virtual conference, unless there's a reason. And one of the thought leaders I really love said, "You have to make the office a magnet and not a mandate." And I think
yeah. I
that's a
totally
really great
agree.
phrase. I love that. I love that phrase because it means you have to offer value. We're no longer looking at, why am I here because I told you to? You're not going to win the war on talent with a because I told you to. You're going to win it
No,
because I think it's valuable, and let me show you why. Let me show
but
you why it's valuable.
the JM, there's another development, I think, in the hybrid culture that plays a role here. I mean, at the moment that people and organizations understood that you do not necessarily have to live within a 30 minutes commute from the office or an hour commute from the office, uh, people tend to live where they A, want, or B, think it's affordable. I mean, the cost of living in major cities is getting so out of hand that
Yeah.
it becomes you need to have a very, very strong magnet to pull people into the office, because they might be living further away than they used to. And that is something that you need to keep in the back of your mind. I mean, my personal commute to the office that I'm assigned to is 3 hours by public transportation. I'm not doing that just to go for a meeting for an hour. I only do that if I'm going to spend the day talking to colleagues and socialize with them, and making sure that we get work done, because then it makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, I think this is a big topic to talk through. I would
Yeah,
encourage everyone here, please email, follow up with us. We'd love to have more of a conversation, particularly about how we can help, and how obviously Eris can help enable this kind of thing. We'll talk about it in a few seconds. But I know this
yeah,
also does break down, Casper, by line of, or by industry. I know it's
Yeah.
not, it does break down by regionality. We're not going to get too much into regionality today. I know there is differences
No.
region to region. However, let's talk about some industry trends we see. And I know that you've been doing a lot of cross-industry analysis and specific industry deep dives. Talk to me a little bit more about what these priorities, what the trends and priorities, and how you think they break down so that they're more focused on the different organizations we might have represented on the call today.
Yeah, yeah, with pleasure. So if you look at the different industries that we are typically active in, then they're listed on the left-hand side of this picture. You see that every industry has its own emphasis and its own attention points. And I'll start with the manufacturing part because A, it's close to my heart, and B, that's where I spent most of my time in.
Oh
And
yeah.
if you look at the trends that you see there, and I'll just take an example of the lead times that you see here. Lead times is something that we're even going past that right now. I just had two workshops with the same customer over the last 2 days where we talked about process mining in a manufacturing setting, and they literally said it's not enough anymore to just know that the lead time from A to B is X minutes or X seconds. We want to go beyond that. We want to know if that lead time is too long, what is the root cause of that? So we can actually go directly into that. Here it is again, process excellence part. So that is one of the trends certainly there is, and then that's across every industry, is the whole influence of Gen AI. So what kind of Gen AI applications do you see in your manufacturing, in your banking? And within banking, it's very often linked to that customer interaction and customer expectations. So the customer journey is really important because there is no physical thing in banking. It's all your experience, because the money that you have is basically just zeros and ones in a system somewhere. It's not even tangible anymore. Even though it's yours, it's not tangible. So Gen AI plays a major role in all industries, putting the customer central. So customer centricity is something that you see specifically in IT telco, also in banking and in the retail market. So everywhere where you have basically business to consumer market, that is a major topic. In the public sector, and I think that will play out in the next couple of years as well, is everything around security and cloud. And as you know, many countries have their own requirements when it comes to cloud. I'll just give you an example. In the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, if you want to do something in the cloud, it needs to be physically within the country borders of Saudi Arabia, your data center. Otherwise, you can't move that data outside of the country border. And there's more countries who have that. You've seen the whole EU versus the United States on who's owning the data and who's so the privacy rules and regulations in Europe are much more strict than they are in the US. These are trends that you see everywhere, and also with remarks to and with relevance to operational excellence. It's the certainly also in manufacturing, where you say, listen, there is much more pressure now on to make sure that you keep growing your efficiency, your productivity. Again, process excellence comes around very quickly, and what kind of tools and technologies can we put in place to make that happen? And many of these tools and technologies, and I'll go back to process mining because that's one of the hot topics in operational excellence anyway, and in BPM. That happens everywhere. It happens with all of our industry. All of our customers are asking for process mining right now. And what can we learn from the execution of our core processes and our business processes, and how can we make that feedback loop to whatever we agreed on, our way of working, which is most often in the form of a business process.
Well, I think there's a couple things there as well. And when you take a look at the process mining and its cross-industry application, one thing you see on the relevant priorities repeated is also customer journey satisfaction and satisfaction. And I think that we take a look at process mining, we start to think about process mining not as just a back end thing, but as a front end. So customer mining, customer behavior mining, which I talked about in a previous webinar. But that's an emerging thing that people are doing more and more to try and understand where customer journeys are going wrong, why those customer journeys, what are the root causes that a customer might leave a cart abandoned, or what you can do to change a customer journey so they come back, and you can retain customers, and the truly the customer expectations are getting higher and higher, as we said before. And there are particularly organizations who have decided to say that their competitive advantage is customer experience. And I think in
Yep.
2024,
Yep.
there's going to be a lot of like table stakes products. Like, hey, A, B, and C are comparable enough that it's really a crapshoot which one you choose. You're going to be choosing the company to buy from that provides you the best customer experience during the buying journey and through the support and maintenance of the a journey of your product. So, for instance, the microphone I'm using right now, I purchased that microphone because I know that the aftercare is very good. So, if I have a problem with the microphone, I can go to them. They have a support line. They have a customer process, an intake that I can go through. Like this, all these components to me matter. Their processes are exposed in some ways to me as a customer, and as a result, they have retained my business. That's
Yep.
more and more a competitive differentiator in certain marketplaces as like the thing you're focused on, and I think that's fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And I
Yeah.
agree with you. I bought my microphone for whole different reasons, but that's the good thing that that's a personal thing. No, but I just got mine off of Amazon, so don't worry about. I didn't worry
Big.
about the after sales. I'm not as professional as you are, JM, on that. So, but anyway,
But you got the trends going on, and I want to touch upon how this really evolves
yeah,
and turns into functionality, because one of the key things about enabling operational excellence, and as you might imagine, because we work for a product company, we're going to end up talking in some capacity about how products are and need to be evolving to meet some of these challenges. On the left of the screen, you're seeing products with a high level of AI enablement, or capabilities that are highly AI enabled. On the right is more stuff that we currently do today that it's a reimagining of things. But I think we are on a journey, and products that are focused on enabling operational excellence need to keep in mind these three conditions. One is that we are on a journey towards autonomous BPM. I think that's pretty well established as kind of the nirvana we're looking to see in a lot of spaces, which is self-repairing processes. And we're not there. We're not there yet. I don't even know how close we are to self-repairing processes. I think there's still a lot of concerns that I have around business context. I mean, we say that
yeah,
data may be king, but context is its crown. That's a very important thing to remember, that the human understanding of business context is currently one of the core components of a targeted improvement. But self-regulating or repairing processes, high level of automation, even in the knowledge work side of improvement, that's where we're going to. And AI is learning is scaling that up. We're also on a journey towards democratized processes. One of the things that I think in the past, BPM and operational excellence have been viewed as very much the sort of expert knowledge worker stuff. It's been relegated to the ivory tower of people who have deep experience in lots and lots of industry and framework and like reference on how they do their job of improving processes. But I'll give you a good example. I'm thinking about the way that we've introduced AI in Eris, one of the AI companion for providing information. You can simply type in a question; it will give you the information on how to do that, or what you should be looking for. It's just in time skilling up of anybody into providing their business context to a business process challenge. And that really democratizes it. It removes that barrier, that barrier to entry for people who want to contribute but don't have the skills pre-baked into their experience in the industry or in their training from university or college, or none at all. And that sort of evens the playing field, which I think is really good. And lastly is, of course, the one we're looking at right now, which is augmented BPM, which I think is all about breaking things down into bite-sized chunks, making it easier to provide instant context, and being able to take really take the first steps towards contextual recommendation for process improvement, process analysis. We take a look at that the quick analysis in Eris process mining. A few different things that we're doing right now with the Eris platform to give you a very simple and easy sort of next step on how you might make a decision or make an improvement, sort of giving you a palette of options to select from rather than giving you the world. A smaller menu is oftentimes something that's much easier for people to get started with. What do you think about this is from a technology perspective, Casper?
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to make a remark. I mean, I certainly subscribe to all three, but let me just give you an example of what I would have loved to have augmented BPM at my fingertips about 10 years ago. And I'll explain why. So in one of my previous professional lives, I was a global supply chain manager, and we were shipping containers across the ocean. Not a very high value product, but still business to business. And whenever I had an issue with the shipment, it took me so much time to figure out which customer is this going to, what is the margin I have with this customer, how much. So in other words, what is the risk if I do not escalate this immediately? I mean, it's that risk balancing question that you say, do I need to jump on this, or can I wait until tomorrow, or do I need to consult with the customer immediately? I mean, that is the context of augmented BPM, where you say, listen, I have an issue now, and based on my AI companion, I immediately get all of the context relevant information at my fingertips to make a good decision. And then once we fine tune that, we can start to move into autonomous BPM. But I think, and I share the I wouldn't say concern, but yeah, I think that's a little while away, given the enormous diversification and multitude of processes that we have and regulations and the different countries in the world. I think that will move in the same way as we do with autonomous driving. Yeah, on an empty highway, it works fine. But at the moment that you drive your car into Amsterdam with bikes and trams and tourists and taxis and canals, that is just an accident waiting to happen. So, I mean, yeah, I totally like this very much. And I wish we had augmented BPM already longer.
Well, one of the things I wanted to hone in on there, because I think it's really important to talk about, is you did mention, I think it's right, that self-driving cars work very well on highways. And I think one of the big challenges in 2024 and beyond is to understand what are your highways and what are your city streets. Because when I take a look at a lot of organizations, they treat bread and butter processes as core value drivers and core value driver processes as bread and butter. And that's not right. I mean, your differentiator isn't necessarily procure to pay. In fact, quite the opposite. That's how your business runs, but it's not what your customers necessarily see. Like, if you can't get your supplies on time, it will affect your delivery dates to customers. But if you're looking to improve that, that's going to be the first one that AI can help you with, because those should mostly be relatively consistent, but based on best practices, right? And so making that decision is important.
It's an interesting point, JM, and coming from a purchase to pay background, I can only adhere to that. I just want to make one small subtle remark.
Sure.
If you're a manufacturing, your procure to pay process for raw materials is absolutely crucial and vital. But anything but that, it should be as standardized as possible, because it's the same bloody everywhere. So absolutely, and I have this conversation a lot. And there are exceptions left and right, but 95% is exactly the same everywhere. So yeah, I think process classification is the name of the concept that you're describing. That not this webinar, we will not go into that, but it's a certainly interesting topic. You can find a lot of information on that in all of the writings of either Jem or myself on LinkedIn. No worries about that.
So I want to move us to these use cases, because we have two more of these nice things to talk about before we get into the questions. And I do see a few in our Q&A. Don't worry, folks. We haven't ignored you. We're just going to take
we'll come back to
last conclusions to our thoughts on this before we get into the flat Q&A. Tell me about the business transformation use cases that works in concert with the idea of a technology-enabled approach to process improvement that leads to operational excellence that will meet some of these trends needs.
Yeah. So no problem at all. So I think one of the major use cases around transformation is that you need to look at alignment of your workforce, your digital workforce, your whole business and IT architecture. Very often automation and ERP transformation play a role in that. And I think that whole black block in the middle is all around the core way of doing your work. So how can you most efficiently and effectively transform input into output? That's basically what it says in the middle part. And then on the left-hand side in green, there's your customer excellence. So we tend to, and I think rightfully so, we tend to look things much more from a customer viewpoint. So instead of saying, listen, this is what we sell, the customer can take it or leave it, you go like, okay, so what is the customer looking for? And how do we want the customer to interact with us? If I compare the process of opening up a new bank account now with 15 years ago, so much has improved. I mean, I just go into the app of my bank and I open a bank account. I mean, it's literally like 2 minutes. The whole identification part is done via your mobile phone and your passport or your ID. It's so much more fluent and easy from a customer point of view. But just think about all of the stuff that bank has to have in order on the backend part. All of the processes, all of the interaction, all of the fact that you are putting data into their system that needs to be safeguarded, protected. It needs to be validated. I mean, there's a lot of things that goes on. And the last thing that I certainly don't want to miss out on and forget to mention is your whole risk and compliance part. I mean, sustainability, I think, is a common theme. Everybody knows that we need to take care of our planet. We're not all doing it properly yet, but we'll get there. But risk and compliance is something that is also getting much more attention on the management board levels than a couple of years ago, because the consequences are simply getting bigger. Because everything is connected, it's all digital. A mistake is easily made, but the consequences can be grave. And that means that you need to have a much better idea on which risks am I running, and to what kind of length do I want to go to either mitigate it or accept that I might have a consequence. So if you put all of that together, you really get into that transformation use case.
And these trends are being addressed with the use cases that we talked about. And ultimately, I mean, as I said, we work for Software AG, we make Aeris. Ultimately, these are trends that you'll need to take care of. These are use cases that will help to meet the needs of those trends. And with the Aeris platform, we do process mining, business process analysis, risk and compliance analysis, and support for automation. Those 4 pillars, the four segments of the pie, to me represent closing the loop on evidence-based transformation that helps you achieve your targets for operational excellence. And particularly with a changing marketplace, with many threats and disruptions happening, more than ever, organizations need to have a solid digital backbone for transformation enabled with people, process, and technology, but in that order. And so we have this system of Aeris that has been built, that is really growing and thriving with companies all over the world and being battle tested with new capabilities every week. It's fantastic. And I think you've seen that digital tools make people and process possible to bring together in ways that haven't been possible before. That's why I joined Software AG, and I'm sure that's why we both of us enjoy the things we do with the Aeris platform.
Absolutely. And thanks for that, JM. And I think we need to spend a couple of minutes on some Q&A before we just keep talking, because we can talk about this all year long.
So I have a couple questions from the first question I got was from Adrian, which talks about BPM working with ERP implementation. I mean, do you want to talk blueprinting for a moment there?
Sure. I mean, the thing with an ERP implementation is that particular project is your one chance you have to review your processes for free, so to speak. Not free in terms of resources and money, but then it's the attention on the agenda. And so at the moment that you do either a greenfield implementation, or you need to migrate into the cloud, for instance, which happens a lot as well. That is where BPM has its most power as well. At the moment, you say, listen, this is the way that we've done it in our old ERP system, or maybe in a different systems. Is this the way that we want to continue working in the new ERP system, or do we want to take advantage of all of the new things that we've learned and experiences that are already put into a new ERP system? So very often, it's a very interesting thing to compare your current way of working or your old way of working with the way of working as it might be suggested in your new ERP system, and see whether or not you're going to change the ERP system or you're going to change the organization. Because normally, and if you would asked me 20 years ago, I would have said that you're an idiot if you let a system dictate the way that you work. But I did come back from that, I can tell you. And some of these ERP systems really thought about, this is a good way to do this process. Procure to pay, again, is a great example. There is a very, very optimal way to do procure to pay using an ERP. You might as well adapt your organization to fit that, because at the moment that you start deviating from a standard implementation for ERP, you're getting into very, very big trouble when you want to manage upgrades, you want to manage other type of changes. Those are things that you need to take into account as well. And BPM will help you with that, because it will give you tools to compare processes. It will give you tools to actually communicate and bring those processes into your ERP with a connection. Certainly, if you talk about SAP, JM, Aras and SAP have a very long relationship together. And I'll get back to that, because I'll need to announce the next webinar in the series, which is actually about this very topic. So BPM works great when it comes to ERP implementations, but I can talk hours about it. So let's not do that now. But if Adrian, if you're interested, reach out to us. We'll certainly happy to help you further.
Yeah, that's great. I want to talk about another question, which is, how do you envision the involvement of process experts in the BPM technology? I can talk a little bit about that, because that's actually what Software AG does. Now, it's not entirely inside baseball, because if that was the case, I think we'd be in a bad situation. But I think instead, what we do is, it's a combination of customer feedback from lines of business and BPM experts coming and building in best practices. We do this through a variety of things. We have haha.io, which is a feature suggestion tool. We have things like customer advisory boards that help to provide business scenarios that customers are actually facing, and where functionality of the Aras platform or technology has actually been successful in helping them to address that challenge, and where it's struggled. And I think those two things combined, so features that are upvoted by community, helping to understand the sort of wisdom of the crowd, and then interviews directly with the significant business leaders in key customers, in sort of a round table or a focus group perspective. I think that really goes a long way in helping to drive an understanding of where that technology should go. I think on top of that, BPM vendors are, so it's kind of responsible for them to also have their own sorts of thought leadership and vision. That's why we talk about democratized, augmented, and autonomous BPM as sort of a vision that Software AG brings to the table here. We have our own plan on how we'd like to see this come together, and I think those two combined provide a great underpinning for technology development.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's one more, JM, that I would like to highlight as a question.
Please, yes.
It's a question in two parts from Jose Camacho. Camacho, sorry. I think I need new glasses. Is around process standardization, and this is it's a bit of a sensitive topic, because standardization has gotten a bit of a bad reputation over the years, because whenever people heard standardization, the only thing that they experienced was layoffs in the end, because it's a productivity tool. Now, the thing with standardization is that you need to apply it where it makes sense. Standardization in and by itself is not a goal. It's just one of the things that you do after you've done your process classification and say, which are my bread and butter processes, like JM mentioned them earlier, can we standardize these? And if so, you'll get great benefits from it. But you will have a lot of processes that are so specific or so core value that you don't want to standardize those, at least not per se. So if you say, listen, if you want to achieve standardization, first take a look at your classification and say, which are the ones that I actually would like to standardize? And then at the moment that you take a decision, you need to be brutal about it and say, this is what we're going to standardize. There is no way back now. It's my way or the highway. And you need governance for that. Very, very
Yes.
powerful governance. So again, now before we run out of time, because this thing
It'll shut off in a couple of minutes, but we want to make sure that we give everyone a preview of our next webinar coming up on February 28th at 4 p.m. CET. Be the first to use your processes in SAP Cloud ALM. A fantastic webinar coming up, so please make sure to mark that off on your calendars if you haven't got that up and running right now. And I know this webinar will self-destruct in less than 1 minute. So thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you so much, Casper. It was a fantastic.
Yeah, one thing, JM, one thing.
Yes.
Thank you very much. But people, there is a survey in this at the end of this.
Yes.
That we would like you to fill in. JM, thanks very much, and I'll say, have a nice day.
Have a nice day. See y'all soon. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one.
Cheers.